Someone was telling me they even put graffiti on the walls, but they talked a lot about what kind of graffiti would be in Numenor and what kind of things the Numenorians might put as graffiti. And I think that's incredible. The audience won't necessarily notice that. It's part of the richness of it.
There was a bird poo expert who was there going like, we reckon they'd be on that steeple and the excrement would hit this period below. Like it was
What are the qualifications for that job?
Art school.
Like, where did you study? Well, I spent a lot of time on roofs.
I'm Esther Zuckerman. I'm moderating tonight, and I am pleased to welcome many members of the cast of The Lord of the Rings of Power. Thank you all so much for being here. It's quite an episode. I wanted to start by asking a little bit about the process for anyone that wants to take this process of getting cast in the show, because obviously it was shrouded in so much secrecy. Did you know who you were playing when you sort of auditioned? What was it like sort of going into this?
Who wants to start?
Yes. It was, I think for most everybody, it was a really long process because they really did kind of scour the globe for each character. And also I had a kind of at the end of the process, I had a call from JD, and I to be honest, I was nervous about the job because it meant a huge amount of time and potentially time away from your family, and also the amount of commitment that it demanded. I mean, down to the research, to the level of your own dedication to it. I was on the fence, frankly. And JD called me, and he was telling me about the character and where they want to go with it and his vision of the show. And I couldn't hear a word he was saying on the phone because there was like a PA system in the background. And I said, JD, I can't hear you. Where are you? And he said, I'm in the hospital. My wife just had a baby. Anyway, the thing about Lord of the Rings, and I was like, oh, well, this guy's dedicated. I think we're in good hands. So, and I think it shows on the screen. Well, I didn't have a baby.
Were any of you Tolkien fans, Lord of the Rings fans, before sort of delving headfirst into this experience?
Now everyone's looking at me. Yes, because there are a couple of us that were very big fans, and I'm one of them. So I read Tolkien from a really young age and just started a lifelong love of fantasy for me and of language, actually, which led me into Shakespeare and all sorts of things later as an actor. But very much so. So it was very much full circle getting Marigold. And definitely the first day on set, really hard to believe. I kept thinking of the little girl that I was, how excited she would be to know that I was stepping onto that set.
What about for any of the sort of newbies to the world? Like, what was the sort of experience, like the crash course of having to inhabit characters that maybe people don't know, but a world that people have so much connection to?
I'm definitely sort of, I would classify myself as a newbie. And it's interesting because a lot of people in my life, you know, when they talk about their passion for this material, especially when they arrive at it at a younger age, you know, there are people that grow up with these stories, and it's always interesting to sort of speak to someone and see how much meaning it carries for them and how it really defines a lot of their adolescence and their coming of age and lessons, you know, life lessons. So as an adult with a little bit more life experience, now being immersed in this world and in these stories, I've gotten the opportunity to do this deep dive in this incredibly dense material that, you know, remains a classic because it's always going to be speaking to some aspect of our humanity or things that we're navigating personally in the world as a society. So it's interesting as an adult to kind of explore this and have it carry this meaning for me just at this stage in my life. So, you know, I think when I was younger, I didn't necessarily feel like this material, maybe it didn't speak to me for whatever reason. Maybe people didn't encourage me to read it, whatever reason that was. So it's nice to not only get to approach it as an adult, but I think, we're all from different parts of the world. We have these different life experiences. And I hope our presence in this story encourages, that young girl or young boy who maybe wouldn't think that this material would be for them to go to the source material, which is Tolkien's books. So I think it's nice to kind of, be part of this and sort of be that for other people, especially younger people.
I love that. Sorry, you mentioned sort of the stepping on set of it all. And I wanted to ask for whoever wants to take it again, what was the experience of stepping? This is such a large production. You're in New Zealand. There's so much going on. Maybe, Leon, you want to take this and talk about Numenor a little bit.
Happily.
What is that experience like? How does that shape performance?
It's completely surreal. I live in Auckland. I live in New Zealand. So I was familiar with the studios we were shooting in, but I turned up my first day, and on the back lot where there's normally, tar seal, there were blocks upon blocks of this mythic city. They'd built Atlantis where Atlantis was not before, there were boats on water. There were different architectural styles depending on which century they felt different parts of the city were built in. There was incense burning in alleyways. There was live fish being cooked. Like it was the most immersive, imaginable filming experience, a real 360 experience as an actor. And you could, in that context, just surrender to it. You didn't have to do a lot of invention to feel like you were part of that world. It was a real blessing.
They even, someone was telling me they even put graffiti on the walls, but they talked a lot about what kind of graffiti would be in Numenor and what kind of things the Numenorians might put as graffiti. And I think that's incredible. The audience won't necessarily notice that. It's part of the richness of it.
There was a bird poo expert who was there going like, we reckon they'd be on that steeple and the excrement would hit this period below. Like it was
What are the qualifications for that job?
Art school.
Like, where did you study? Well, I spent a lot of time on roofs. And also to kind of piggyback on this, but I disagree if you didn't have this experience, but I also found that yes, the sets were incredible and it was you were kind of gobsmacked when you walked into this world. But at the same time, then it felt like you're just kind of actors trying to milk magic out of these lines that you've been given. Like it didn't ever feel like you were on like an amusement park ride. Like it felt like almost like an independent film where you got your camcorder in your kitchen and you're like, okay, now we're gonna pretend the sink is lava. Like it did feel like a return to fantasy storytelling, like you said, like and like. Almost that it ignited that inner child in you, and then you got to work with some of the best people on the planet. So it's a great gig.
Yeah. Nazanin, I was wondering if you could sort of speak to this because, in the episode that we just saw, Bronwyn is dealing with, she has this relationship with Arondir. She is mothering her son. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit, going off of what Ben had said about sort of finding these moments, finding these relationships as Mount Doom is erupting.
I think, for Bronwyn, she is motivated and driven by love. So that's her through line. It's her love for her son, her love for her people, her love for, in the Forbidden Romance with Arondir, the elf. So that is the thing that drives her. And I think you look at her and she might seem demure and, not necessarily someone you would count on to slay orcs. But I think the great thing is she's a reluctant leader. But when you have that inner conviction, that mama bear, I will do anything to save my people, my son, my love, there's no mountain that you can't climb. And I think that's what I love most about her.
I wanted to talk a little bit about the technical aspect, and Daniel, maybe you could speak to this a little bit because you're coming into this series as a mysterious stranger who stands, 7-8 feet tall. How tall is he supposed to be?
In the story, he's my height. Okay. So it's just this rather brilliant thing about scale where, the half-foot's sort of 4.5 feet tall and, everybody's sort of in different relationships. So through their eyes, he certainly looks giant-esque, but he's actually story scale, sort of same height as me, yeah.
what is the process of sort of, acting with also all of this other stuff going on? And Sara, maybe you can also speak to this, in tandem, as Harfoots and the Stranger sort of interacting and working together.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the very beginning, I worked principally with Markella Kavanagh, who plays Nori, and the Stranger only really interacts with her for the first few episodes. And so Markella and I had done quite a lot of work to find the connection, whatever that was. The Stranger obviously not really speaking very much. And once we got that in rehearsals and then began to put it into practice on set, we suddenly realized that, in fact, there was no way we could both be in the same shot together. And at the top of the show, that was sort of heartbreaking. It was difficult. And actually, we were aided by a brilliant team of scale workers and VFX team who, over the course of the season, really tried to manipulate the techniques more and more so that we could spend time with each other on screen, and when we did get to that place. But at the beginning, there were all sorts of technical issues that we had to overcome. There are some brilliant technical things. So there's a piece of kit called the Techno Dolly, which is an automated computerized dolly with a crane camera, and it sets its movement for one person. So it would take Markella playing Nori as the master of the shot, and it would move around and it would be plotted, and then it would move exactly the same but in a lesser or greater extent to make me seem bigger or another person seem smaller, depending on what we wanted. But that meant that one of us was acting to nothing, and the other was acting to somebody who was pretending to be bigger than they were, and it was a bit of a new thing for me. But I think the short answer, which I've gabbled around, was it started off very tricky, and then as the team got to know each other, it became more and more understood, much easier. And thankfully, because I think this ensemble has worked really closely together, and we've all felt for each other in the way that the show has been put together, actually, we began to find ways of telling that story in a much more sort of honest way between the two actors who were playing those characters. And by the end, I don't think we noticed it really as much. So,
and definitely a massive shout out to the scale artisans that what they do is incredibly difficult, because they're not coming up with the characters themselves, the characters' motivations or movements. They're just mimicking what we have already come up with, and then they have to do that in a way that feels organic and feels energetically like us. It's not just a question of, I need to move like Sara does Marigold. They have to become my version of Marigold for those moments that we need to use them. And there's definitely times when I looked at the screen later and I was like, that was me. Oh no, that was not me. That was like, so that's how great they were at what they did. Without them, and because we had them, we could keep a lot of things practical, which was really, really important to all of us. As obviously as actors, you want to be there. You want to be there as much as you can, doing something practically as much as you can. So yeah, they were incredible.
Amazing. Benjamin, you mentioned earlier the research process, and obviously some of you are playing characters that are completely new. Some of you are playing characters that, have lore that already exists. And Benjamin, you're playing a character that there is a lot Tolkien has written about Gil-galad. And I was wondering what the process was of sort of researching that and, what that was like.
Yeah, most people know Gil-galad from that song Sam sings in the movies, but there is quite a bit you can read about him if you're so inclined. And I'm so inclined. I enjoy reading, and like Sara, I grew up with the books, and so one of the joys of the job is actually the research. And not only specifically about your character, but you have to learn what they would know and study what they would have lived through and experienced. And that's just one of the joys of it. And we touched on it a little bit, but Tolkien by nature is biblical in that sense. Nobody reads the Bible and goes, well, I read it, I'm done, I get it. It's the same with Tolkien. Every time you go back to it, like you were saying earlier, that at different points in your life, you take something new from it. And that's certainly been true for me. So it's just one of the joys of the job. Gil-galad is fascinating. I mean, I'm biased, of course, but yeah.
For any of you, did you sort of how did you approach sort of the research and the preparation, knowing that there was so much text that existed?
I thought there was a really fun thing that happened out in New Zealand because we were all sort of out there without a lot of support network, and during the pandemic we were sort of forced to stay there in a way, but we were also living this very free life in comparison to everybody else in the rest of the world. We were able to get together often, and we were each other's support network, and there was a lot of talk. Talk always turned to Tolkien. I felt like people would give their pearls of wisdom. The people who knew a huge amount would ask questions of the people who were just coming into it, and there was a great deal of sort of communal knowledge that was passed around, or questions that were raised. And I enjoyed those like people would meet in cafes, whole groups, or for dinners, and the talk would frequently come to story and what it meant, and where we were experiencing things in New Zealand, what often feels strangely similar to what was going on in the actual real world. So for me, it was sort of symbiotic that these two things went together.
I would also say that there is sort of the task of doing the research, with the source material. But when I joined on and started, I had actually been in lockdown in the US for many, many months. And so when I got cast, it was the strange thing of going from lockdown at home for months, 2 weeks of quarantine in a hotel in New Zealand, and then sort of walking out the door into a semi-normal sense of life and embarking on this journey. But in the interim, there was so much that I had sort of been navigating mentally, spiritually, just, as the whole world was. And so for me personally, the role of Mediel became this safe haven for just a lot of things that I was thinking and feeling. And it just so happened that there was a lot of nice overlap because, my take on Mediel was she was a woman with a lot on her mind, let's just say.
Also, in some ways, staving off destruction, which coming out of what we had all gone through feels pretty relevant.
Yeah, I didn't want to take it too literally, but it was that thing. But, it is that thing of, again, that just so happens that there was, again, the research with the material, but then there was my own, let's call it emotional research, or just that sense of, I can't articulate it always, but in this moment, I know exactly what this character is feeling, and I happen to be feeling it too, and it feels very just as it's happening, as you happen to be standing across from another actor and looking into their eyes, and they're just very sort of real moments of connectivity. And I think that for such a grand, epic story, I think the reason why this resonates, I know it's why it resonates for me, is it's really just about the humanity of it. It's taking this big, big, big story and looking at the things that people can latch onto and recognize within themselves. So, I feel like I personally think with our group and everyone involved in making this, we were coming from a very real, honest, thoughtful place, and I feel like it all shows on screen. There was a lot that wasn't necessarily just about the acting of it.
Well, also because in terms of research, what we've been discussing is that there was the research we did on our own. There was the collaboration between the actors in realms, and then as a big company, we were so very close. But there was also an army of people. Like there was a full, there's stunt team who talked everything to do with that, and there was like the dialect team, and there was the movement team, and there was law masters on set, and we got a Tolkien quote every single day, and also
that's cool.
It was And we're in New Zealand where they've lived with Middle Earth for 20-something years. So everybody there knew so much about Tolkien, everybody. So there was always someone to talk to, and someone who'd be like, oh yeah, I worked on the Lord of the Rings and this is what I think about this situation in Linden, or, whatever. And so you had like a veritable army of people that could be part of the process as well. So there was so much to draw on besides what you were doing yourself as an actor.
Speaking of armies, Nazanin, I wanted to ask about, the episode that we just watched and the experience of this is the big this is the sort of first huge battle that we're experiencing sort of in the context of the show. What was that like performing? What was the preparation that went into that?
Many months of stunts training. I've never done anything so physical on screen. I have done stunts before, but this was another level of commitment. I'm so grateful, as everyone's been saying, of the team. We had so much help. The stunts team were amazing. But it's also hugely invigorating to be able to, slay orcs on screen. Something I never really thought I'd do. But yeah, I just think, there's a lot of, when I auditioned for this role, one of the scenes was the speech that she gives in episode 5, and there's so much about this character that resonates with me on a very deep level, and I think that love for her people, wanting to liberate her people, I can hugely relate to, and it's really gratifying to see that translated to screen and to watch that happen. So I hope all evil is destructed everywhere.
I think we have to wrap up soon, but the last thing that I wanted to ask was about sort of, for anyone who really wants to take it, about the experience of, Leanna, you were talking about stepping into the world of Numenor and how detailed it is, but also stepping into the costumes, the ears for some of you, Muriel's incredible headdresses and all of this. How does that sort of change your movement, and really bring you into these characters in the story?
Well, it's a collaborative art form by nature, and actors are really interpretive artists. And that's one of the greatest joys about the job, is that you become a canvas for other people that help inform how you work. For example, Gil-galad has these rings that he wears, and no detail is too small. Kate Howley and I were talking about these kind of, almost it looks like something the Pope would wear. They're gorgeous and they're handmade, and she thought, well, we should do something else with them. And what we know about Gil-galad is he is a politician, but also he's a warrior. And if you look closely, when he closes his hands into a fist, the rings start to kind of interlock into these gnarly brass knuckles. And it's just another moment of storytelling that is born of a collaboration. And I think that's one of the best things about this show. And then that it is a television series, and you can be immersed in each world and really luxuriate in those details, but also everybody gets to shine. The guys who paint the VFX, create a world that's even more beautiful than the one I had imagined. And when you hear Bear's score, it becomes an army of artists united in one vision, and we're very lucky to be in lockstep with them in any way. Exactly.
We have to wrap up, so I have a sort of. Do you guys have theories? Do you have theories on who Daniel is? Do you have theories on who Sauron is?
Do we?
Yeah. Do you? Do you know everything, or or are you talking amongst yourselves the way people who are watching it are doing it?
Nobody talks to
I'm
me.
Sauron.
Marigold is Sauron. I've said that already today. I worked very closely with Dan Weyman and spent a lot of time with him over a long, many months. I still don't know. He loves giving it. Look at the smile. Look at the smile. He loves giving it to himself. I have my theories, but yeah.
I will admit to going online, and sometimes I enjoy just seeing what other people come up with, because again, people they're coming really from a place of intellect, and it's really studied. I mean, we talk about this all the time, how you just hear someone making a case for their argument, and it's like, yeah, that's actually pretty logical.
That's what they should have done. Yeah, that's a great idea.
Well, thank you all so much for being here.